I'll be taking notes like I did last week. So please, anybody who has an item to add to the notes, feel free to do so using um, at item during the discussion. Please also register your attendance with the meeting with the @ here in the chat so that we can accurately track who actually showed up today. All right. Given that, and I will share the agenda. All right. Hopefully everybody can see the agenda. We're now using a rolling agenda. So it'll be the same document every week, and we'll just prepend items to the document as we go. Oops. Just gonna do some other things here. All right. For the agenda bashing, anybody have any changes, additions to the agenda before we get started? All right. Since there are no issues, we'll move on. The first action item that we have was an action item for me, clarify minimal set of features for stabilization. In particular, there was questions about what HA means. So what I've done is I've created this document. Can people see the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay.
Yep.
I just kind of took the list that we had earlier for the kind of components, and I added a little text context to them, particularly around HA, with making these clear that the assumption for HA for Volta Core is just restarting the microservices when they fail, and not covering failures such as data loss when etcd goes down. etcd loses data, comes back up, the system's not supposed to recover. So HA, in terms of what we're looking at for this stabilization brigade, really is just if microservices restart and everything else is okay, they will reconnect and system will continue to function. I'll probably try to work on this a bit more, spread out some more text around some of the requirements. Please feel free to edit that as well. The other spreadsheet, the other page I added to this was based on conversation yesterday in Slack. I started to capture the components that make up Volta, as well as where appropriate versioning of those components, so that we know what version we're going to be working with. Also put the Git repo, just because a lot of components were in the same repo, which I'm not sure that we want. I labeled them core, which basically means do I, as I label them, consider them part of Volta code, or are they more kind of associated with Volta but not part of the core code? So you can see things like the read-write core, so if agent are core, but things like the any specific adapter, Kafka's, those things are kind of context around Volta. The next column, which is required, basically says, well, these components are required Volta to run. So where Kafka, for example, isn't part of the core, it is required for Volta to function. None of the adapters were listed as required because, well, you need one to do something, I guess, but not any one adapter isn't required. Finally, just capture the language they're written and some comments around that. The other thing I've commented here is, do we need to take out some of these components and put them in their own separate repo, right? Is there any reason, for example, OF agent is in Volta Go? Should there be a Volta OF agent, a Volta API server, those type of things, so that the components can evolve independently? And so I'm starting to track that too.
So David, similar to that, there's two different OLT implementations in the Open OLT container, the Python and the Go. Is there a reason they are together, or should they be split out?
Good question. I would think they should be split out, in my personal opinion. But
they were originally together because at the time, the only one that existed was the Python one, and the Go one, there was nothing there. So for the purposes of functional parity, having them together made sense because they had to both at least work the same, and at some point one would become deprecated and then the other would be the only one left. At this point, the Golang adapter should be the primary one. The Python one, especially if certain changes get merged in soon, will no longer function.
Correct, and the point here is, I guess the question is, there were reasons things were done. There's always reasons things were done, and at the time makes perfect sense. The question is, when we look back now, does it make sense to split them apart, or because we're deprecating one, should we just let it be and at some point deprecate the old one, the Python one, and remove it from the repo? I would personally think you wouldn't want to continue with both in a single repo. When you deprecate one, you either delete it from the repo or create its own repo.
I mean, it could be in its own repo. It certainly won't hurt. Just work.
Yeah, the other complication, I think, is that they also not just are in their own repo, but they end up in the same container image. And I think someone brought this up last week. I forget, maybe it was in private, but people tagging these things, it could get easy to, if you tagged a custom version of this repo, forget whether it's a Python container or a Go container, and you end up installing the wrong one. Because I think the only difference when installing the container is the tag that tells which one you built. One is like a -go tag and the other is not a -go tag.
And there actually are, examples of that, I guess, in Docker Hub too. When you're doing a Golang container, for example, the difference between a Golang based on Alpine and a Golang based on Ubuntu is really just the tag. So they're the same repository name. It's just a tag difference. So I'm not as shocked, that's not the right word, but seeing a single adapter image differentiated by tag, I guess that's not terribly unusual, although the code bases are different. But I do think it would be helpful if from a source code they were at least in a separate place.
That's fine. I think that's it.
Is there any reason to maintain two versions of the same adapter?
No, and that was the earlier comment. The Python one, at least, is going to be deprecated. It just hasn't been yet.
Is it something that we need to do before starting on the brigade work, or is it something that we will do after? Like, for example, the OF agent API server makes sense to be in our own repo. Do we want to do it now, or do we want to do it after we have a stable release?
The only problem I have right now is the 1.7 release of Volta depends on the Python adapter. So if we can deprecate it and remove it to its own repo, but that has implications on the 1.7 that I don't know yet.
Wait, 1.7 wasn't a single repository?
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
So the Python adapter and
That's true.
the Go adapter as it is today, this second, is currently functionally equivalent to 1.6, but the 1.6 builds don't depend on them or don't use them.
Okay.
Right now, there's nothing in the 2.x that'll do 1.7 anything, though that may change in a few days. So again, I guess when we say 1.6 versus 1.7, it's not so much that 1.6 or 1.7 uses any code in here. It's just it's functionally compatible.
Okay.
When the work started, it was 1.6 was what was available at the time to basically start the fork.
And the last item you set in the note, David, is true for 1.7 because the adapters are not containerized in there. They are in the same container as the Volta core and in the same repo. So whatever we do with the new adapter will not affect the older Volta.
Okay. That's right. That's my mistake. So I would say we want to deprecate it and remove it to its own repo, if not just delete it. But I don't think we want to. Well, I think we want to keep the code around for a little bit. So deprecate it, move it to its own repo.
Yeah. What I can do, I'll modify the OpenOLT adapter build to basically tag and prefer the Golang one as the latest, or it gets the bare tag, or the tag that doesn't have any decorations on it, so that when you run it, if you don't look for anything specific, you'll get the Golang one. And then if the Python one is built and you don't use it, then it's built and you just don't use it.
So the question, I guess, are we going to be using still differentiating Go and Python versions by tag or by repo name?
I mean, if the simplest thing to do right now would be just by tag. That's a quick. Moving into a repo, I think, would be the end goal, right? So we clean it up so there's not all this extra code there. And that's a little more work, and it just takes more time. But if the goal is to really just make it clear what you're building is, what you're getting, just having the tag, the bare tag, be what you work with, be what's there, makes the most sense. Just because if there's another image that's built that you don't use, then it's just another image that's built you don't use. Or we could change it where the default build target doesn't even build the Python one unless you go out of your way to say build Python.
Okay. So that's fine. So we're gonna move it so the default tag, which is master, will, as opposed to latest, will reference the Golang version of the adapter.
Or whatever the symver says in and of itself.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think, to Ken's question, I think we worry about repo switch after 2.0 is actually working. I wouldn't consider it necessarily a high priority as long as we're defaulting to the master to be Golang. Even moving OF agent and these other things to their own repo, I don't know if we consider those high enough priority things to do now, or we need to continue to get the code working first and then move it. Thoughts on that, anyone?
I think let's get the code working first.
Okay.
My one other thought with deprecating the Python, I don't think we need to split that into its own repo at any point. Like the point of version control is to keep the version, so we can just delete it. We still have it in version control if we ever really need to reference it.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. The question is, if we want to keep it going, or if someone keeps developing on it, I don't know. We'll have to we'll see if we need it. But again, if we can just delete it, deleting it works for me.
We don't have to worry about that now, anyways.
Yeah. Just writing some notes. All right. Next action item, unless there's any other things, going back to the agenda. was from Zach. Zach, I saw you online. Zach
Yeah,
did.
I'm here.
Yep, Zach did update his branching document.
Yeah, there should be another to the very end examples that goes through how you would create a new release that would include patches that applied to certain versions. This started, I think, about after the libraries item,
Yeah.
very bottom of your screen. It goes through. You decide to deprecate anything, or there to be a only supporting one release, and then how you would patch core and then get that patch back into a released version, which is that whole section.
Yep.
Which I think was what was requested. If there are any other questions, I can go through and go through how that the exact mechanism of making that happen. But I think it should be fairly straightforward.
Okay. Thank you, Zach.
Yep.
Go away, little thing, so I can get my tabs again. Okay, I'm gonna have to move some things around because apparently, there it goes. Zoom wanted my whole screen for a minute. All right. Moving on to the next topic. There are two OF agents versions. One is in Volta repository and one is in VoltaGo. How are they functionally different today? I know a little bit because I noticed the one in VoltaGo didn't have support for all of the metering messages, where the one in Volta did. So I thought having a little history of why we have two versions, and does it make sense to have two versions, and do we need to, if we have one version, which one do we have? So can anybody speak to that?
Well, the one in VoltaGo started with 2.0. With 2.0 release, we changed the gRPC in the sense of there is a set of, in 1.x, we had two different type of services. We had the global service and the local service that was in Volta 1.x. In 2.0, it didn't make sense to have both of those services, so we renamed all those to Volta service. So that triggered changes in things like the CLI and the OF agent. So this is really the big change. And also OF agent had to work with the API server and the logic. There was some minor change tweak that we had to do with the logic. So that's why we started with a separate repo for OF agent in the Go. The other OF agent, the Python one that works with 1.7, I believe that going forward with 2.0, 2.x, whatever it is, we'll have to deprecate the OF agent, the Python version in the other repo, and keep the one in VoltaGo.
I thought the one in VoltaGo was Python as well.
No, it is Python,
Okay.
except like it works with 2.0, while the other one works only with 1.x.
So the question, I guess, becomes the one in the Volta repository. Has evolved beyond, I think, what the one in the VoltaGo repository has. In other words, it has capabilities the other one doesn't. So do those capabilities need to be ported?
Yes, they need to.
VoltaGo?
Yes.
And is it easier to port those capabilities, or is it easier to start over with the one in Volta repository and make the gRPC changes, i.e. global replace local service and global service with service?
There's not a lot of changes that needs to go, because most of whatever needed to be ported is being ported. The biggest one was the meters, and that's already being ported. And there's, I think there's two minor one, which is about transparent flows that need to be ported. And that's it.
Okay.
For what it's worth, there are other library items in the Volta 1.x tree that have been and continue to have to be ported over to their 2.x variant repo in the same way. OpenOMCI items, some of the ONU and OLT items. The thing is when all the 2.x work started and all the new repos were created, it was effectively a hard fork from everything in 1.x. Everything was completely separate, completely brand new. There is no dependency between either one of them. And the changes made in one now have to be manually carried over into the other very painfully, which is why having both of them continuing to work is bad. So yeah, PyVolta, OpenOMCI changes have to be carried forward. So maybe there might be a couple of ONU changes, but anytime anybody checks in anything into the 1.x tree, we have to look at, does this need to now go into whatever 2.x version of that repo exists?
So I guess the question is, at this point, is there continued development on the 1.x tree for these items? Anybody in the call know?
I don't think there is anyone working on 1.7 at the moment.
The only thing I've seen around like OF agent, maybe a couple of weeks ago, was the transparent flows. And that's it.
Okay. We're going to have to figure out how to freeze that, because I mean, the problem is what we're going to see potentially is bug fixes against 1.x that then have to port as well. So I'm going to create an action item for myself to figure some of this out. Features. Talk to someone over there who's focused on the 1.x tree to figure out what its future is at this point. All right. Any other comments on that section then? All right, moving on. Branch and freeze. So a lot of discussion yesterday in on the Slack channel, where we're trying to get Volta 2.x up and running with the Go adapter and BBSim. And there are, 5 patch sets that I know that I kind of gleaned from the chat that are outstanding against 2.x that I think need to be reviewed and merged before it may make sense to branch and freeze the 2.x code. There, if anybody else knows of any other ones, please let me know and we can track those as well. One of these is a rather large change. I think that's 14767, which brings in metering, I believe, as well as some other changes. Really the tech profile stuff across many different files. And the question is, I guess, when do we see these patches merged? Because if they're merged, today, then that is one set of implications. If they're not going to be merged till next week or potentially late next week, that may have a different set of implications in terms of allowing people to get Volta 2.x up and running and kind of do more testing. The largest implication around that is that if we can not get these merged, then the Golang adapter, using the Golang adapter, you won't be able to get a BBSIM instance up and running, authenticated, for example, which is fine, again, if we get these merged and they work tomorrow, but not fine necessarily if it takes another week and a half. We don't want people sitting on their thumbs.
I mean, I guess other folks may have experienced different things in different environments, but master as it exists today without these patches and a single BBSIM ONU does work. So
That's with
again,
older ONOS though.
With the old, right. So again, with older ONOS. So, you know, of course, if you change things, things change. So are we trying to say that these need to be in to work with tech profile? Some of them are tech profile related. Some of them have nothing to do with tech profile.
Correct.
Some of them just have to do with stability in general.
Correct. So the release features for the Stabilization Brigade require tech profile. So if we call that set of features release 2.1, whatever, that we're trying to stabilize, 2.1 is not code complete or feature complete at this point.
Correct. All the changes are not for tech profile to work.
Right.
So 2.x will not function in that way.
Correct.
Right.
So the question is, what do I want to say? Do we get these patches reviewed and merged, and then branch and freeze? Or are you suggesting, well, if you use an older version of ONOS, you could branch and freeze right now and do some and get BBSIM-based ONU up and running?
So it's I guess two different things. If we want BBSIM ONU without tech profile, we have that. If we want BBSIM ONU with tech profile, we got to wait. If we want to wait till the tech profile feature set is in place, I mean, I'm okay, you know, with waiting. That's fine. We can just get these in, make sure tech profile actually works with BBSIM, with hardware, you know, across, you know, a number of environments. At that point, then we can, you know, branch and tag and say, now we start to harden it. But if, you know, if not, then we just need to wait for these patches to go in, whether it takes days or weeks. I mean, it's really just a question, do we want it now? If we want it now, then we don't have the feature. If we want the feature, then we wait as long as it takes.
So I think one part to this question is the testing on the large tech profile patch. Right now we have, using what Matt showed us yesterday, you know, this older ONOS end-to-end test that we can manually do and show that a BBSIM adapter will come up. Do we gate this large tech profile patch on being able to reproduce that same workflow with the newer ONOS and only merge it, you know, when we know it hasn't inadvertently broken something else? Or do we just merge it and if there are problems, consider that part of the stabilization effort to fix those problems post-merge? I guess what I'm pointing out is the lack of a current end-to-end test gating our check-ins.
Yeah. I would say at this point, I would not merge any of these patches, not just what we've affectionately started to call the monster patch, but any of these patches, I would not merge unless we can do that end-to-end BBSIM ONU up.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I'm supportive of that.
Anybody disagree with that?
You may not need only one set of patches. There would be, because this big patch has certain dependencies on other smaller patches. So you need to have, you know, like take all those different patches and then build those images and try it out. It's not just one patch.
No, I agree. And it may be that we take the source tree and cherry pick all these patches into that, run it. If we get end to end, merge the things, right? So after we get all these to verify state, we probably have to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
But I would think whoever's building those patches are also making those tests, right?
I would hope, but it's not necessarily true. So I do think I understand the concern. It does bother, because there are patches that are kind of codependent. We're going to have to merge. As we merge these, any individual patch may break the end-to-end story, but I think all of them together have to meet the end-to-end story of these 5, at least, of these gating features or gating patches.
Assuming this is all of them, I would be surprised and shocked if these went in and everything worked. Just based on past experience. This is a massive change, and I think there will be many days of kind of unwinding flow decomposition and trying to figure out who went where and what happened with what. I don't think it's going to be a quick process.
Hi, this is Amit. So I have a question. So I agree with the proposal that we don't take these changes for the moment into the stabilization branch, but then what would be the next window when we would think about taking those changes in? Because then basically the work happens in 2 parallel streams, right?
No. I think the assumption's wrong. These will be in the stabilization branch. That's not the issue. The issue is we're not going to merge them into the code base until we can take the master branch, if you will, cherry pick them into that master branch in a working area, and reproduce the BBSIM end-to-end case, i.e. bringing an O and U up. Does that make sense?
I would also
Okay,
say
yeah, got it.
with hardware as well. I know BBSIM is a great tester, but if it doesn't work on hardware, none of this matters.
Oh, come on. No.
It's got to be tested on hardware. It has to be tested on hardware.
Are you volunteering?
I mean, let's put it this way. Every time I do a patch or I cherry pick or test anyone else's patch, I do test it on hardware. It's not something that I could do all the time. It's just whenever we get around to it here as part of our changes, literally it's part of our minute-by-minute dev cycle. It's pushed to hardware, make sure it all works with an edge core.
Yep.
Actually, the big patch up top, yeah, you betcha that one's going to be cherry-picked, and we're going to try that one.
Yeah. I agree. I default to BBSIM mostly because I don't have the hardware. But yeah, if you could, agreed, beyond the BBSIM test, have that test against actual hardware is a good thing too.
BBSIM is great at abuse testing. I've been able to run up ONUs much faster than I could ever do on real hardware, so it's great for shaking out those types of situations. But if BBSIM works and hardware doesn't, then we kind of have to laugh at ourselves a little bit.
Yep.
So, just to be sure, after these patches are merged, we should be able to use OpenOLT version 1.7 on the real hardware. And before this patch, we need to use the commit that is right after OpenOLT 1.6. Is that correct?
Right. That's my expectation. My expectation is agent driver that is tagged 1.7 will work after this patch is in. That's exactly what I'm going to try.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the patch, the big patch currently doesn't pass even unit test. So we had to wait until at least Jenkins pass before it can be taken and try out.
Agreed. That's what I'm waiting on as well.
Yeah, and the comment yesterday that shook me a little was that we don't think we're going to get to passing unit tests till the end of the week.
No, it was not just passing unit tests. It's we need to get the unit test to pass. We need to make sure that there's additional tests being added to that patch, and it has to run in an end-to-end environment, like, because it's a big change. And I believe, like, the folks that are writing that patch, they may have an environment where they can run it end to end. So that was my comment about why I don't think that this patch will be merged before end of the week, because it will take some time to get those done.
Okay. Is there a list of tasks left to be left to do associated with this Jira and patch set, i.e.
Well, I put a set of comments on
Yeah, I saw that.
that, and most of them, well, pretty much all of them have been taken care of. The only one that has not yet been taken care of are the unit tests not passing, and additional unit test, and end-to-end testing.
So I guess the question is, are additional sets of hands helpful to get this patch set to the appropriate state, i.e. People creating unit tests, additional people to help create unit tests, for example? Or is there enough people already working on the patch set that additional hands actually wouldn't help?
I have no idea. It's a question to Manik, or maybe Amit. Maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, so for unit tests, right, there are two parts, right? One are extending the tests that are already available on the Volta core, and also on the Golang OpenOLT adapter, unit tests don't exist as of today. So we have started working on Golang OpenOLT adapter, writing the unit tests, and definitely, yes, a few more hands would help there. And also the change set that Manik is submitting, and as discussed with Ken, we are starting to do some unit tests for the changes that we have done.
Okay, thank you. So if someone has some cycles, is it just best to email who? You, or to help out with the Golang adapter unit tests? Or just start going through the code and adding tests? What's the best way to get engaged if someone has some cycles to help?
That's to Amit, right?
Yeah, let's do it. You may have gone offline.
What if we did this? So right now, the one unit test that's failing in the Go, the Volta Go core patch is related to EPOL, right? Presumably, if that EPOL unit test fails, EPOL will fail with the real configuration. So if we got that one fixed at a minimum and passing Jenkins, at least then others could faithfully at least cherry pick the patch and then shake out other issues as they find them. It's good to add the unit tests, and we need them. It's just, if we can at least cherry pick it and start running it through an end-to-end test, we can find issues with, BBSIM and real hardware.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I kind of, I'm not a great fan of that, because I think because there's so much changes that's being done around meters and flows. Having some unit tests there, writing some unit tests, and actually the developer testing it out, I think will remove a lot of uncertainty about that code. Otherwise, we may end up trying a lot of cycles to get it to work.
I agree. The unit tests are good to have. I totally agree. I just think it removes some of the, lack of concurrency and being able to try things in different environments, right? We're kind of all waiting for, something to work. So, I mean, it's not saying they don't need to be written. I just don't know if everything has to stop until they're written.
I guess what I interpreted your original comment was can we get the EA poll unit test working so we have confidence EA poll works? And at that point, the patch set should be verified. I still don't think we merge it at that point because you can cherry pick. But it gets, I think, a level of confidence that things kind of should work, and then people can cherry pick into their own environment and start testing it. And at the same time, additional people can start writing more unit tests. And I was of the impression, again, my reading of it or hearing of it was we wouldn't actually complete the merge of that patch set into the tree until additional tests were written as well as the end-to-end was done. It's just getting that first green check mark so people have a little more confidence that they can cherry pick and test it themselves before the merge. Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, that will work, I guess.
Yeah,
So-
I'd say cherry picking and running is fine, and we wait to merge until the unit tests are in. But if we can at least start cherry picking and working with it, that's something.
Because I think right now the issue is because the EA poll unit test isn't working, there's no belief that it will run anywhere in terms of or complete the end-to-end test.
That works. Depending on the nature of the test, if the test is about pushing the ePoll flow, in many cases, the first real decomposed flow that's pushed. If that's not playing out right, then everything else is pre-open flow at that point. Yeah, we really need that one to at least work right.
So again, it goes back to the question is, well, two questions really. For that specific decomposition flow decomposition, are there additional hands needed to help there, or i.e. it's small enough bit of the code where someone's already working on it and additional hands will actually just make it worse? And then there's the question of if people have additional cycles to start writing unit tests against some of this code, how do they get onboarded to do that? I don't know if Amit's back yet or not. Okay, I'm gonna.
Yeah, David, I'm back now.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Did you hear those questions?
Yeah, so one was regarding how do we get more people to write the unit tests, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, regarding the unit tests that we need to expand on for the Volta core, right? I would think that adding more people is not going to help because we need to add something onto an existing, like the code was added to an existing code base, right? So depending on that, the test cases need to be written, and I think it would be efficient if the guys who wrote the code does the unit test for that. But on the Golang Open OLT adapter unit test cases, right? I think we could use more. What we could do is we could write a few test cases, using some frameworks and or conventions, and submit those, and then create some subtasks logically, break it down into multiple pieces, and people could pick up the subtasks and work on those.
Okay. Okay, and for the EA poll test case, at that point, you've got enough resources, people to work on that one?
Yeah, so the philosophy or the convention that we are doing is that as we write the unit test cases, right, but we are doing end-to-end testing to validate the functionality. And I wouldn't say that we are covering 100% of the cases, right, all the error scenarios.
Right.
And yeah, that definitely can be done at this point, but at least the base cases are being tested end-to-end before we push in the code.
Okay. Do we have an ETA to where you think that existing unit tests will pass for this patch set?
Unfortunately, I can't give you an ETA because what I know is some of the integration test cases that were done for the meter add, flow, and delete, those have been written and those are going through fine.
Okay.
But apart from that, for the unit testing, I don't have an ETA right now. But I would think that it's going to take some time. It's not going to be a couple of days. I think it'll be more than that.
Okay. Okay, appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, so given that, we're probably looking, as the assessment was made yesterday, at least a week out before these patch sets are going to be merged. Are there, I guess the next question is, are there patch sets in this list that aren't dependent on 14767 that can be merged in?
I think there are.
I think there's 3 of them.
Okay. So we can work towards getting those 3 reviewed, merged once they're code complete, and then we will wait for the other patches. So 14767 to get to a place where we can start cherry picking that. All right. I guess in terms of implications, that may mean that it may make sense to back some of the other code out to use the older version pre-tech profile, or at least document how to do it. All right. Anything else? Any other comments on this section before we move on?
Yes, that list that you have, those are existing patch sets. There are some other patches that will need to go in. For example, for HA, like when we talk about restarting a container, and when it comes back, everything should be functional. There is a feature, task feature, whatever we call it. It's called reconciliation, and that's not implemented yet. I'm implementing that, and it's from the core sending out a reconcile to the adapter when the adapter restarted. And also the adapter will need to do some work for that reconciliation. So it's not on your list. I created a Jira for that. I can send that to you.
Yeah. If you do that, then action. I'll forward any Jira required for feature complete to me. Yeah, if we can just start capturing those Jiras too, we'll track that as well. I mean, I did label a bunch of Jiras with the stabilization label, but some of those were bug fixes, not feature complete fixes. So if we can understand what features need to be implemented still to get feature complete, that's good. Also, Ken, if you have Jiras, or anybody, if you have Jiras, when you forward them to me, if you could think it's something that someone else could take on, please let me know, right? Because I don't want any one individual or group of individuals just to be overloaded, right? We need to spread this around a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. The only other comment there is item 4B there is once we get all that done, we're going to wink at Zach, and he's going to do his magic to get some the versioning and releases done, which is what that last item is. All right. Any other items on that topic then?
Just to add to that last B item, if there are specific repos that need to be tagged or branched, and if that needs to happen earlier or later, like if we reach that point earlier with one specific repo, just let me know, and I can jump in at that point and make a tag. I'm assuming that I don't know, maybe the adapters get done before the core or vice versa. And that might be helpful from a testing perspective to stabilize things one component at a time.
Okay. All right. Moving on then. CI/CD pipeline. This is a carryover from last week, or and this diagram, Kent, I believe it was you who wrote this diagram.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something about it?
There's been a fair amount of discussion about this already, most on both to discuss, some in previous meetings. I feel like we're reaching an agreement on how to do it. All this slide is really showing is that we'll have a continuous integration pipeline, and stuff will get won't actually get tagged and published until it's past that. And then the other company discussion that people seem to be on board with was we'll have a canary build as well of sort of all the masters, which should help make development easier for most people.
Okay.
I don't have anything else to say. I think.
Okay. Just typing up some stuff. Okay. All right. Moving to the next one then. This is another carryover.
Yeah.
Post-release support.
Yeah, I brought this up mainly as just so that we could think about it. This is assuming we get beyond, well, of course we're going to get beyond stabilization. We need to make some decision of how we do post-release support, how many older versions we support, whether it's time-based or version-based, when we expect people to upgrade, and possibly what those upgrades look like. So it's just something to keep in mind going forward, and it's sort of separate from the entire stabilization process, but it's something that maybe needs to be handled even at a higher, maybe TST level. If there are any people who have opinions about that, I think we should air those, but maybe those don't need to be aired quite yet. But just know that if you have some question about versioning or post-release support, we should probably come up with some policy that discusses that at some point to help answer those sorts of questions when they come up about how long am I going to keep patching an older version and that sort of thing.
Okay. Is there an existing policy for any other projects?
Currently in the cord proper, which SIBA has sort of inherited, it's one major release behind. So now that, for example, SIBA 2.0 or the SIBA 2.0 alpha also was technically cord 7.0. So I think we still support the last version of the 6.0, which was 6.1. And so 6.1 and 7 are supported, and then when 7.1 comes out, we may only be supporting 7.1 and 7.0.
Yeah, I guess the question was, did SIBA cord someone, ONF, come up and say, here is our post-release policy and written it down? Is there a document that describes it, or is it really just kind of this is what we're doing?
We have it written down, but I'm not sure I'm not sure how specific it is to like point releases and major releases behind. I think it's been one previous release, and release is either a point or a major.
I guess the question is, does it make sense to try to unify this across ONF projects, or does it make sense for each project to have their own?
Probably depends on resources. It's really what this all comes down to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and how quickly you want to support something, and how much you really want to support an older version, and how much that's important to individual service providers.
All right.
If everybody is up for upgrading regularly and has a good competence in it, I think we should encourage that rather than have people get stuck on older versions, which can lead to forks and other
I
nastiness.
I think that runs into problems when you look at production, right? Customers that I've worked with in the past, they don't want to upgrade every 6 months, 3 months. Once they go through the qualification testing of a piece of software, it's going to have to stay in production for a while because it's expensive to upgrade. And unless there's a significant reason to upgrade, you don't want to take that pain on. And so it might be a yearly cycle or something to avoid that. So, for instance, the cadence of Onos, where it was every 4 months, is problematic. It was every 4 months or every 3 months. It was problematic, right? People aren't going to be able to upgrade that quickly in production. And that goes back to where we talked about the canary releases and LTS release too, where sure we can have, once we cut an LTS release, we're going to support it for a much longer time than, a non-LTS release, would be my opinion. Okay. All right. But we do need to define that, but it is a little premature as we don't have any release right now.
Yeah, that's correct. And
all right. Any other thoughts then? All right. If there's nothing else, we're going to end the meeting with a new record of being early so you can all get on the call for the next one. All right. Thanks.
thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.